All right, my friends, welcome back to the Reisinger build project. We have installed our Pella front door here, and we're just about ready to start installing some beautiful Luna wood from our friends at Delta Millworks. But there's something critical that I see that's done wrong all the time on job sites, and people don't realize, hey, what's causing the ceiling to buckle or to move or to have problems? So in the build show today, we're going to show you a couple details for installing wood, whether it's vertical on this siding that we're doing here, or whether it's on a soffit or a porch ceiling, and do it correctly so it's really going to not give you a problem in the future and look gorgeous from the day it's installed to decades later. Today's build show all about installing wood correctly. Let's get going. Okay, y'all, let me catch you up to speed on where we're at here and what we're about to do. So we're in the frame stage. The zip system sheathing is on. All of my utilities are in and poked through the wall already. And I did notice, by the way, that I had one wire that hadn't been liquid flashed, so we still need to seal that up. You're also going to notice on the base of this wall here that this zip R sheathing that we've got here, we taped the bottom of that with some zip tape, and then we used some pink Prosigo joint and seam at the base of this wall to make sure we don't have any bug or air penetrations where the house meets the porch. This is slab on grade. I've got a concrete porch here. Now here's the deal. The architects wanted me to do some wood siding here. Oftentimes when you think of siding, you think of horizontal, but we're doing a slightly more modern detail where we're going to be running this wood vertically on the porch. And then we're also going to run this wood onto the ceiling above us here, the soffit space or the porch ceiling. Now, as I've visited job sites and houses that are, a decade old, let's say, I've seen a lot of porch ceilings that look bad. And there's one issue that I see that gets wrong all the time that we're going to fix on this job and show you how to do it right. Before I get to that, though, let's talk about the siding. So this particular wood it looks a lot like Western red cedar, but it's actually called Luna wood. This is a really interesting product. It's been thermally modified. This is grown overseas. I think it's from Finland originally. And they thermally modified, meaning they heat it, they kind of bake it. And when they bake it, the sugars bake out so that the insects and the bugs don't like it. And this has a giant warranty. I forget what Delta Millworks says, maybe like a 30-year warranty. I'll link that below because I don't remember the specifics. But needless to say, this is going to last a long time. Now, this is pre-finished. You don't necessarily have to pre-finish your wood. It does make a big difference if you're thinking that wood is going to lose some moisture over time. Because this is thermally modified, I'm not worried about shrinkage and gaps. If this was a pine material, though, one issue I see a lot on both siding and soffits is as that wood dries out over time, it shrinks, and especially people that finish that wood after the fact, you end up seeing gaps. And let's say if this was a darker color, you might see on this tongue and groove product where the color has changed, or we got to bare wood, let's say, in those gaps. But on this particular case, we're going to be running vertically. Now, best practice whenever you're running wood is to give that wood the ability that if it gets wet to dry out. So we want to put this wood on a rain screen. Now, there's a couple different ways you can do that. On this particular project on the rest of the house behind my brick, we use this zip rain screen product. This is basically like a 3D mesh that has a black WRB fabric on it. And before the brick went on, we laid this up over top of the zip with that mesh sticking out. The reason being is when the masons come and put their mortar on and brick this, some of that mortar is going to fall behind the brick pocket in that 1-inch gap. And we don't want that mortar to be up and globbed up against the zip system sheathing. If we had an area that had high exposure and a lot of rain, we could get moisture that was sitting on those globs. Think of them like hockey pucks. And if I had 3 hockey pucks in a row, we could have moisture sitting there that could potentially get into the house in some way, shape, or form. We don't want that. So by putting this WRB on the outside, it's going to make sure there's an air gap behind there and there's not going to be any moisture sitting up against us. Now, on the other hand, if I put this wood siding up against this WRB, I'm not going to have airflow behind the wood, even though I will have airflow back in this cavity. So I'm actually going against manufacturer's recommendations if I use this by flipping it where my wood siding might be. And now you can see, now this would actually, if I install that wood up against that mesh, This would give me an air gap back there and would allow some airflow and drainage and drying back there. However, this mat is only about 1/4 inch, and that's not quite enough. Anytime I've got wood, I really want to think about anywhere from 3/8 to maybe 3/4 of an inch behind there, because I want some airflow. I want the ability for air to flow back there. Now, if I was running this horizontally, I could just put some 1-bys on the wall here, and that would give me some ability to flow through. You can see I've got some strapping on the ceiling. I could just use that same strapping on the wall, but we're running vertically, so now we need to think a little bit differently. Now, I don't have them on site yet. We're coming in just a minute, but we're going to be grabbing some 4x8 sheets of a material called Coroplast. This basically is Coroplast as well. Now, this comes from a company called Coravent, and this is intended for soffit venting, but what you're seeing is this is a black material that's made out of plastic, and it looks like corrugated cardboard. We're going to be running it like this on the wall, so that when I put my vertical siding on, I'll get airflow through those cells, and I can nail through this into my studs and into my sheathing when I nail this on vertically. Now, this is pretty lightweight wood. I'm not super worried about the weight and the heft. It's going to easily be able to nail through this. So that's what we're going to end up doing on this job, is running these horizontal strips to make sure that we've got airflow through there. And this wood, when in or if it gets wet, will be able to dry. Now, a couple of things to remember though. I've got a concrete porch here. This very likely is going to get wet when the rains and the storms come. We don't want that wood to be touching the concrete. We always want to leave a gap. So we've talked to the framers. We're going to leave about a 1/2 inch gap between the bottom of the wood and the concrete. That will also allow us that space for air to flow up in there. And then where we come against masonry, also don't want that wood touching the masonry. We don't want to butt it tight and scribe it. We actually want to leave a little bit of a gap there. So we talked to the frame carpenters. We're going to leave about 1/4 inch or so in that gap, and then we'll come in with a Sashco product later and caulk that joint with a flexible caulking so that it won't have any moisture transfer between the brick and the wood. Now, here's the detail that I teased at the beginning that I see wrong all the time. We don't want this wood to be on the soffit tight. We want to leave space for air to flow, and that's where this product in particular is a really nice one. This is Coravent's strip vent, and I don't need it quite this wide, so we're going to cut this into a 1/2 size portion. We'll remove these staples and we'll turn it into about, I don't know, 1/2 inch or so. And we're going to create a vent space on both sides of this porch soffit so air can flow into there. We're also going to gap this wood down from the ceiling so that I can make sure I've got airflow behind here and into this soffit area. Now, if you look up in this soffit, if you were to look behind me here and look straight up, there's no ventilation out of this soffit to the roof above. There's no ventilation into other cavities. My house has been monopoly framed, which means basically this sheathing goes all the way up continuously, and then I framed the porch later. That's really key to an airtight, bug-tight house, but it does mean that I need to figure out a way for air to flow into the space. We don't want any unventilated spaces on the house. So we're going to be creating that vent space with those soffits. With that being said, let's get the carpenters over here. We got a bunch of work to do. I got some time-lapse cameras. Let's let them get started, and we'll get at least halfway through before we pick it up again. Okay guys, sorry about the ductopus in the way here. This is my 5-ton temporary job site heater and air conditioner dehumidifier running into this window. But the crew got about halfway and stopped for me so I could show you a few of these details. Our horizontal rain screen is up now. And let's actually take my tape and verify the air gap. We've got just shy of a 1/2 inch air gap. I like that. 3/4 is even better, but this worked out fine. This is gonna be plenty. Also notice the cells are oriented vertically, so if you look straight down, you're gonna see that we're gonna get nice, good airflow. The team gapped this off the floor by about a 1/2 inch. You can see I can shove my fingers under there. And then as that wood goes up, you're gonna notice it's gapped on the ceiling as well with this 1x furring strip. So now I can get airflow all the way through there. And if you notice on this side, we've already got it up. That's our ventilation strip. That's that Coravent that I showed you earlier in the video. So now I've got good airflow through and behind the siding and then all the way up. Now let's be honest, this is not going to get a lot of water, or it really shouldn't get a lot of water. We're nice and protected with this overhang, and that's one of the reasons why I was really excited to see some real wood on both the siding and the ceiling here, because we're well protected in this zone. They tell me at Delta Millworks though, the service life is more like 30 years. It's going to be similar, nice long longevity like you're going to see for a cedar, but very sustainable product. A couple other details I want to mention. My front door from Pella had a brick mold pre-installed, but I did a jamb extension on that, or kind of a brick mold extension. We decided to paint it black to kind of fade in with the door, but that gave us something to dye into in the wood. And we did the same thing with the window as well. Now I purposely face screwed this, and we could have covered that with either a plug or some caulking, but I purposely left it. I realized that it's maybe not quite as aesthetically pleasing, but what I wanted was, you know, in 50 years, if this window needs replaced, I want to be able to pull that trim, replace the window, have full access to the flange around the window so that I could use liquid flash or zip tape in a couple decades and put a brand new window in if I ever need to do that. Another thing I want to mention, this Luna wood is actually a 1x6, but you all know that a 1x6 is not actually 6 inches. It's a nominal 5-inch exposure because the board with the tongue is actually like 5.5. So we're just using a finished nail, a stainless finish nail at the tongue portion. Remember, it's tongue and groove. But as a general piece of advice, if we go wider than, let's say, 6 inches at the face, I want to think about actually face nailing or face screwing and plugging the product. Even more so on ceilings than walls. That's not necessarily a Luna wood, that's really kind of in general, especially when we think about pine and other standard materials. And be really cautious about that cupping that I mentioned that can happen. We want to acclimate our wood really well. Speaking of that, Delta Millworks, if you buy from them, they have a fabulous install guide, really a gem of a piece of literature that will help you as a builder. You really want to read that as the builder and then tell the crew the important things. Have them read it as well. It's available in both Spanish and English. But when you buy from them, that's a really big value add that you've got that. Now, one last thing that we want to talk about before we finish the video up. In the corner here where my Luna wood comes into this brick section, you notice the crew did a real nice job of spacing this off by at least 1/4 inch. If this brick has any moisture, we don't want that moisture to transfer to my wood if it was touching. We also don't want to mortar that with a standard mortar like we use for the brick because it'll crack in time. So they left it open, and what we're going to use is backer rod in there first, and they're going to sell this in different sizes. There's 1/2 and 3/8, but it looks to me like this 3/8 is going to work out perfect. I'm going to stuff that backer rod in, and that's going to form the basis of a caulk joint. Now for caulking, here's a great option for you. Sashco, longtime sponsor of the Build Show, makes this product called Moreflex that I used at my house also. It's basically big stretch caulk that's been sanded. And you can grab a Keller chart wherever they sell it or online, and check this out. The gray Keller matches really well. And when it's done, you have a hard time not knowing that's actually mortar. But this will create a flexible joint. So we're going to run that backer rod all the way down on both sides here. We're going to caulk that, and now we've got a flexible joint, and we're not touching materials. Whether I'm using fiber cement or whatever type of siding, when I come up to masonry, whether it's brick or stone or stucco, we want that flexible joint there so we don't have cracking in the future. Guys, big thanks for joining me out here. This has been a really fun project. In particular, this is called the Reisinger Build Project. If you haven't seen the other videos, catch up. We've been building this in partnership with Builders First Source, and we've really been documenting the entire process of the build. But in this particular video, I wanted to focus just on the wood ceiling and the wood siding on the porch. This video isn't intended to be an exhaustive how to install your wood products, but I did want to give you some really good details, especially about porches, soffits, and using wood in general. Hopefully you learned something today. Guys, if you're not a subscriber, hit that subscribe button below. We've got new content here every Tuesday and every Friday. By the way, go check out our new content posted almost every single day over on thebuildshow.com. With that being said, follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Otherwise, we'll see you next time on The Build Show. Hey, one last thing for my professional builders, remodelers, contractors, anybody in the construction industry, I've got a sample box for you from my friends at Sashco. They know that if you use their products, you're gonna love them and be a lifetime customer like I've been for the last 20 years. So if you're a pro, I'll have a link in the description below where you can get a sample of every one of these. Lexel and Big Stretch are kind of their kingpin products that I've used for years. They also make Through the Roof, which is a version of Lexel that's intended for the roof. They have a brand new kitchen and bath caulk that just came out a couple years ago that's mold resistant, has active enzymes, and they've got this exact color that you can actually use your caulk or stain on the job to tint specifically to a color that you want to use. And then of course Moreflex, like we talked about in today's video. Link in the description below for a free box sent direct to you.